Consider supporting Archaeosoup on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Link available in the video description. Thank you. Did you know? Well, folks, these are challenging times. The past 18 months have been difficult, to say the least, and for many of us this is the first time we've ever seen illness on the scale of an epidemic or a pandemic. Some of us are fortunate enough to have been vaccinated, whereas most people around the world still labour under the unmitigated effects of COVID-19. And so before I get into a historical case study that may seem whimsical in the current context, I want to say thank you to everyone who is looking after us at this time. The historical record of epidemics, pandemics and plagues is extensive and stretches back at least 3,000 years. Beginning with the plague of Megiddo in Canaan around 1350 BCE, right up to modern day. The list becomes more detailed as history proceeds, populations expand, archives survive, but broadly speaking, the history of disease is the history of humanity. One of the first truly widespread pandemics that we know of was the Antonine Plague of the Roman Empire. It claimed between 5 and 10 million people over the course of 15 to 25 years. It is thought that this plague was spread by soldiers returning from campaigns in the Near East, and it is possible that this pandemic even claimed the life of Roman Emperor Lucius Verus in 169. But this is not the plague of Verus. Rather, this pandemic was named after Verus's co-regent, Emperor Marcus Aurelius, whose family name was Antonius. The Antonine Plague is also known as the Plague of Galen, after Galen of Pergamon, a Greek physician, surgeon and philosopher who described the pandemic. Galen was methodical and curious, known for dissecting animals in order to better understand anatomy, and also challenging Aristotle's assertion that the heart was the seat of human reason, observing that gladiators wounded in the heart continued to be lucid right up until death. Galen had been travelling, but was summoned back to Rome by the two emperors in 168, where he observed that the plague was great, of long duration, and manifested in those who suffered with it as fever, diarrhea, and pharyngitis, an inflammation of the throat. There was also a skin eruption, sometimes dry, sometimes pustular in nature, and that these eruptions appeared on the 9th day of illness. Galen coined the term plague to describe this illness and its scale, from the Latin plaga or plango, meaning to wound, cut, or strike a blow. This could have been in reference to the physical symptoms suffered by individual patients. It might have been a comment on the scale of the disease, the blow to society, or it might have been in reference to the mournful beating of chests at funeral processions. Whatever the case may be, Galen did not clearly define the nature of this pandemic, and it is thought that perhaps people were suffering from smallpox, maybe measles, or even a combination of both at the same time. Thankfully, smallpox is not something that we have to worry about today. Before I was even born in May 1980, smallpox was eradicated by the Global Smallpox Eradication Program, a remarkable and determined example of global health cooperation. However, as Marcus Aurelius lay dying, As Marcus Aurelius lay dying in the final year of the Antonine Plague, 180, he could only dream that smallpox would be eradicated. He said, "Weep not for me. Think rather of the pestilence and the deaths of so many others." A committed Stoic until the end, He also wrote in his philosophical tome Meditations that corruption of understanding is much more a plague than such a distemper and change of this environing atmosphere. At this time, people very much believed that disease resided in the atmosphere as a poisonous fog or a miasma. Anyway, he went on to say, "For this is a plague to animals as animate beings. That is a plague to men as human beings." In other words, as deadly as this pandemic had been, it was in fact lies, evil behaviour, twisting of truth, and a disdain for understanding that was truly dangerous. But thankfully, just as with smallpox, we don't have to worry about that anymore.